make sure I say it right, the 1947 classroom building that is currently irrigating the maple trees and the grass on the west side of the property. We're asking you to grandfather it in and allow us to continue using it for exclusive just irrigation of the trees and the grass. We can follow the other rules that are supposed to be getting followed. But during the subdivision process, we'd like that grandfathered in if we could, please.
Okay.
And does anybody have any questions about the mischief that's going on, or are you guys up to speed anyway?
On what?
Well, I'm trying to buy part of it, and part of the purchase price is I'm doing the subdivision, so it actually gets all the way through now. So that's why you're hearing from me. Hello. Besides, I haven't picked on you for like 3 days, Larry.
Feel left out.
I know.
The problems we have here is we're the entity that has to decide on the subdivision. So we've got to be careful about talking about the subdivision. She's requesting for some easements and stuff like that. But there's some problems with that, and until everything gets ironed out and it gets to be a formal proposal, there's a risk to us discussing it. If we were to say, yes, we like your ideas, and then we go through and say no to the subdivision, we'd be in real trouble because we gave her false hope. So we've got to be real careful what we say. But the well issue doesn't seem to be too tied to the subdivision proposal. The well issue is that she keep the trees and the grass green and force covenants to make sure that no buildings go in that site, and that site remains green and an area for those trees. And so that's the request, that they well be allowed to stay on. And as I understand it, the previous owner lied to us and told us that that well was not being used.
Right.
And it is being used. And so.
Who was that?
Mariah.
Yeah.
Mariah Alexander, yes.
Who has the water rights that are now being transferred out of her name? Yes.
That well is over on the
I know where the
far
gas is.
side of the building.
It's in what Marlis calls the courtyard.
Your ordinance too, I think I gave you a copy of your ordinance, so you'll see. And we almost have to amend the ordinance to include that, I would think, if you did it.
So I guess I have a question just to get me up to speed. Is the block that is not the fire department, is the rest of it then is what is up for sale, contingent upon sale and subdividing? Am I up to speed with that idea?
Yes, the fire hall is going on. Would you say, John, that that's half the property?
It's like a third, isn't
A
it?
third of the
Yeah, I think
property?
it's about a third. It's the width is basically 90 feet. It's like tenths of inches under and tenths of inches over on the two ends. But it's basically a 90-foot wide, 300-foot long strip for the fire hall. I don't know off the top of my head what the width of the rest of it is, but I know it is somewhat more than the 90 feet. But
So then that leaves the rest of that property for sale.
Okay.
Fire hall lot is .627 acres, and the remainder of the other lot of the school subdivision is 1.515.
So I guess just for me to understand, so this is, we have the town ordinance that says anytime a property changes hands, that any well will be negated and you hook up to the town, and they're asking for a waiver on that. Am I up to speed with that part of it?
Correct. And so when Mrs. Alexander purchased that building, she requested to be allowed to use the well, and we denied her that request. And then she continued to use the well anyway.
And then we pressed her, and she said she hired Ollie St. Clair to come in and disconnect everything. I should have went and crawled around under every cubby hole to make sure that that happened, so that was my oversight. But you look at somebody and don't look at, they're gonna look right in your eyes and lie to you.
Well, and it's a
So-
little bit deceptive because the well is capped, when you just look at it, right outside the building. But the holding tanks, the electricity and all of that stuff is actually monitored out of the oldest section in the middle area. So when you're talking about having to go crawl around, that is really what you'd have to do to confirm whether or not that well was being used. It's not exactly like you can just walk up to it and see
No.
if it is or is not.
So my understanding of the well right now, it's being used to provide water for bathrooms,
Yes,
and
Yes.
it's being used to
Irrigate.
provide water for
Yes.
the grass.
I don't know how would you deny anybody else? We've got 9 other wells. How are you gonna deny anybody else to say, okay, you hook on the water, but you get to keep that well for irrigation? You're just, if you do this for one, you're gonna have to just throw that out. That's in my opinion.
Well, we've already in the past had people cap their well.
We
on
disconnected one, and we've got potential of 2. One's gonna happen, but we're waiting until after the first of the year to get started. So there's another one's gonna go. Property right next to that is for sale, and he's aware that that well will have to go. So those 2 properties are already under the assumption that those 2 wells will be gone, and one's gonna be hooked up for sure, the other one will be after it sells.
and part of the
Across
thing.
the street, there are large parcels that have that issue too.
See, and part of the thinking is this isn't a residential property, and you've got the high school and the hospital grandfathered in, right? So the question is, if this is, the property we're looking at irrigating is property that can't be developed commercially if we put those clauses in there, and it stays available in the community for, you know, like I said, the farmer's market and all those things that people really don't make any money on. It's more of a community service than anything. So it's available as an asset to the community rather than a parking lot, bluntly. And that's why we were hoping for some sort of an exchange where if we kept that protected, we maybe had that as a little prize or something. I don't know what else to call it in this exact moment. I went blank. Incentive. I got a word. But basically because it is a residential and it is that type of a setting, that's why we were hoping that maybe you would consider it.
Okay, so I hope you guys understand the issue. It's a beautiful portion of land that she would guarantee then would basically stay green. Otherwise, we don't get that guarantee, but if we open the door here, who knows what's coming in the future.
Would it behoove us to have Tom Orr? I hate spending money on him, but, because we did grandfather those other places, but that was based on, they pull all sorts of city water for the school and everything, and they have this massive amount of grass that they had these wells before we ever owned it. So they were based on that, so if we grandfather this guy in, is there something that's gonna cause us problems with the next ones? Even though it's a small thing, would he be able to give us a legal opinion on that?
I'm sure he could.
Can
yes.
just give me a half a second. I'm
Absolutely.
brooding. I'm. If I withdraw this, that doesn't mean anything to that. Can I withdraw this for now?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay.
At least you know I'm up to mischief now.
Yeah.
And when you see me wandering around,
And
I
Maurice,
haven't-
if you want us to run it by the lawyer before the next meeting, we'd be glad to do that.
okay. I thought, didn't you guys run that piece by him too, though? Because I knew that we ran the other two. I thought you ran this one too.
I talked to him just a tiny bit about it, and he kind of left the issue up to us.
Okay,
If we really were seriously thinking of granting this, then we would have to have him probably take a look at
Mhm.
how our resolutions, how our statute's written.
Okay,
and tell us what we would have to do in order to
okay.
accommodate this issue.
It could be a
We'll just
three-month process too.
Pull back and take a breath here, Matt.
Sure.
If you amend the ordinance, you have, it's a 3
3
month,
months.
first reading, second reading, and then 30 days after the first or second reading before it would go into effect. So it's a 3-month process.
So, just out of curiosity, to expand the thought process, when we went and put the no new wells in as part of our ordinance, I don't remember exactly, but somewhere along the line, we were compensating people who would convert over and give them X
That's
amount of.
already in the ordinance. It's already in
Okay,
the ordinance.
well, anyhow, so my question is, if you end up thinking about the idea of rescinding that ordinance, would there be some other way then for compensation of those you have bought out, or would they be able to buy back in?
Yeah, see, that's a real issue. I don't know, we'd have to really think about that.
We bought one out, that's all we've done so far. And all he wanted, he actually probably could have got more from us. All he wanted was us to pay for the hookup.
And that's what we
And
have
then we
in
got
our
to cap
ordinance
it
in
and
lieu
everything
of-
like that, and he said
in
he
lieu
was
of
happy
cash
with
pay.
that. Now, the other one that's got to drill under a state highway, that's gonna cost us some more money, it's gonna be $5,000 to $6,000. And so, I don't know where you would, how you would do your different buyout there. If you're forcing them and you've already put it in there that you will reimburse them, because that's what you didn't want to do, is just take. You could have just taken and said sorry, but you decided to reimburse them the cost of the well, so I don't know where you'd come up
Well-
with something different.
Where I'm coming from is, in the discussion earlier, a few minutes ago, you talked about, you've got this guy and this guy and this guy that are all getting ready to switch over to the to the Superior water system. And if there's any possibility that you're gonna undo the statute, or undo the ordinance that you've got, now's the time to do it before you bind everybody else up that's coming down the pike that Roger mentioned. And I'm just saying, if you're gonna look at part of it, look at the whole thing.
Yeah, and we instituted that ordinance. When we instituted that ordinance, we didn't do it lightly. We had real reasons for doing that.
I understand, I was part of that discussion, but
Right.
I'm just saying,
Right.
if you're looking for exemptions, and then, well, what do you do to undo it?
Yeah.
Was it primarily to get rid of people using the well water as domestic water?
The real reason was because if we allow wells, we would lose our system, our water system. Our water system requires the town participation. The cost of the city water is high enough that people can see that there's long-term savings to putting in a well. And so if we allow that, we simply will not have enough money to finance the water system.
And you also don't want multiple access to your aquifer. We've got our aquifer here that we are set in, and that's one thing from rural water, and all the engineers says you got too many accesses for potential. Even though we're not an industrial town, there's still potential for your aquifer to be contaminated, and we have no way to monitor those other places. So if we limit that to as few as possible, then we've got a better chance of keeping our aquifer good.
And then, of course, if you allow wells, then there's always the issue that you could get cross-contamination. The well, somebody drills could somehow get tied to our city lines, and that could cause real problems.
There's another aspect then too, is fire supply, or having adequate town plumbing to get the water to the hydrants.
That's where the real expense comes in providing city water, is providing enough water to the hydrants. If we just had to provide water to individual residents, the cost of our water system would not be nearly so high. Okay, can we move on? Okay, we have a law enforcement interlocal agreement. Ernie, is this basically the same agreement we had last year?
And the only thing that we're looking at changing is just the hourly rate. And last year when I had approached the council I think we had talked about maybe renegotiating the contracts and the county employees got a raise, but I did not come back to the council to do that. I just left the rates as they were. I opted not to do that. I took a look at our budget and I think, Ronnie can probably agree with me, I think we did okay without having to do that. So what we're looking at overall is less than an hour, less than $1 an hour change from last year. And what you see on your sheets that you passed out, I don't know which one is this one you gave them. Yeah. Is that like what we did for Alberton? There is a day differential and a night differential, and I took those and divided them in half like we did for Alberton. So half of the hourly rate was at the night differential, half of it was at the day. Combine those to come out with your average. It wasn't as high as we thought it would have been because the county decreased the cost of the insurance because they raised the deductible for the county employees. So that actually drove some of the costs down. So again, overall, it would be the same contract as last year's except with the hourly rate of $26,525. And that's, like I said, less than $1 an hour from last year's.
Okay.
Part of it will be reimbursed from the cost grant.
And the top grant's gonna cover, I don't know, you can figure out the percentage, yeah.
No, I had to drive the one piece of paper to Missoula to have it overnighted because the comptroller at Washington DC will not accept second day air, will not accept a fax, will not accept email. It had to be
Really?
overnighted.
What was this?
Last week,
Oh, I didn't know that.
$38.14 for one piece of paper.
Did that include your full gas cost, ma'am?
No, ma'am.
I was thinking
That
that
was
doesn't
not my
sound right.
mileage. You know, my hourly, because I'm there, I have to be working anyway, but you know.
Maybe we should
Takes
have
about
them
4
I was
hours.
talking to you during that.
Free,
You
and
were,
they could have taken it in for you.
I was like, you've got,
Sirens going.
and there's no place here that you can do a
Overnight,
FedEx
yeah.
overnight.
but he could do sirens through the road construction.
I don't drive through the road construction, I drive the old
Yeah,
road.
you go down Mullen Road.
Okay, let's get a
Sorry,
motion
sir.
on this.
Okay, I'll make a motion.
Okay, we've got a motion on the floor, and Doug seconded. Any questions on this proposed interlocal agreement?
What was the increase? It's 2446.
That would be the increase.
That's what the increase is. The contract is $71,249.
Right.
$299, sorry.
But what was the cost of living allowance?
1.6 for the county employees, which we didn't include in last year's.
Okay. But this comes out to be what, 3.5%?
I think it's a little less than 3%. I was looking at that too, Larry, and
I
I
think
think
it's
it's a little less.
3.5, right at 3.5%.
I should have brought my calculator.
Which is pretty close to what the COLA was for the state, when they changed it.
Yeah, we're trying to figure out what the percentage is here.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's right at 3.5%. Keep looking at it.
The math teacher will prove me right or wrong.
Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry, I was thinking it was closer to 2%, but you're right, it is right about 3%, 3.5%. So it is approximately cost of living.
Okay.
I felt we got a pretty good deal last year, so I don't think it's totally out of line.
And then how much is the difference gonna be between the COPS reimbursement and our?
The-
Cost grant is 54,000.
Yeah, because I think we're considering the first year, because you took so, I'm still trying to figure out the years considering it took 6 months to hire somebody.
Well,
And the
they took
program.
somebody out.